to talk about, is it okay to purchase your own tools, whether this be tarot or oracle decks or crystals or runes? Where should you purchase your tools? I think that's an important conversation to have. And the idea of, do you have to be gifted certain things in order to work with them? Or how many tools are considered to be too many? So,
First off, when this topic came up, a little triggering. Call me out, sure, because oh man, when I started, especially I'll bring back shaman class. I remember being the person who was like, okay, we have to have all these different things that'll help. Like you have the sage and the smudge stuff, and you have the oracle and the tarot, and you have the crystals and the stones and the pendulum and the this and the wands and da 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 da. I got it all. I went out and intentionally picked out all the things that I wanted and connected with, but I got it all. And I ended up getting this big ass tote. It was like in
She's
my
not
toolbox.
kidding.
I'm not, and it's on
It's a
wheels.
tote. It's like those committed scrapbookers
yep.
or committed construction workers with the
I
pole
remember
behind.
that thing. I remember you bringing that to class. Oh
Yes,
my God.
I packed it all. I had books, I had everything. And it probably stems from something more deeper. Like I hate going places and not being prepared or knowing the parking situation at a new place. I don't like feeling like I don't have what I need. So in this new endeavor, we were really going to be working with different things. I didn't know what was going to be needed at what time. So I packed it all. I had it all with me. And man, was that the wrong choice. And I was seeing it was so too much. It was just too much. So
Why was it too much? So let's go. Why? Why was it over preparedness?
I was going to say, yeah, why was that overwhelming?
When going through things, I actually realized I don't like working with tools. The wands, and I mean, I love crystals and having them around. I love my decks are my go-to. But everything else, like I have a rattle and I have my singing bowl, but really they just kind of hold space in my house and in my, little space that I'm sitting in. I don't actually use them for their intended purposes. They almost have a personality and they hold an energy for me, but I'm not really actively using them. And I had all this stuff that I love. I still have most of it. I absolutely adore and love it, but I didn't use it. I was in class using myself. So that was kind of a good empowering moment. Like all of this is here to support you and to bridge the gap when needed between our physical vessel and whatever you're working with. But ultimately, you don't need all of it. I ended up leaving that in the corner, just working with my hands or working with my intuition or whatever was flowing through that day. And I really found that I could have if I wanted to, but I just felt goofy using whipping out this crystal wand and trying to spin a chakra when it just didn't feel like it fit me. I have it, it's beautiful, I adore it, but it ultimately was a good lesson. But yeah, I definitely had too many tools in my toolbox, physical tools in my toolbox at that time. And we won't get into how many oracle and crystal or tarot decks that I currently have, 30-ish or more.
I mean, that's a few.
It used to be 50 to 60. So I've pared down.
Okay. A valid point is that when I don't personally own any wands, but don't you love what it conjures up in the imagination when you look at a wand or you look at an older tool, the drums or I'm thinking of those things from Karate Kid, those sticks
with
little
sticks that drums back and forth.
Or any tool. I'm sorry, I'm not very well versed in this, but when you look at it and think this is something that they did, and to me it creates this nostalgia. Like if you were into retro car collections, or it's kind of retro tools that are here's an ode to, I appreciate where I came from, and the people that came before me, and collecting their stuff, whether you physically use it, or you sit on a shelf and appreciate it, is, I think, valuable and makes you a more well-rounded and versed and expansive person.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. The idea of, when you're first starting your practice, whether that's working with other people in a circle or in your own space at home, the idea of having to have these tangible objects and then possibly outgrowing them. When we're talking about wands, we're talking about stones or other materials. A wand could be made of wood that is used to direct energy. So, for instance, the way that we learned is to use typically a darker wand to extract energies, frequencies that don't need to stay in the body or the auric field. And then a lighter stone to bring in light from the divine or from source to bring your energy back up. So
I
you
did
can
not
do,
know that.
yeah. So that's how we would do those kinds of practices. But then that's not to say that 20 years down the road, when you've been doing this for a long time, that you have to keep doing it that way.
Yes. Just kind of like what we talked about last week a little bit with when you're first starting and you need a physical object, let's say a crystal, for instance, and a crystal wand or something, you're connecting and you're tuning yourself into the work. It's easier because we are physical beings.
Right.
So we're touching, we're physically working with that energy, and at some point you can wean yourself off of it. You've got it. You have that vibration accessible. You
Right.
know what you're working with. The more you experience it, the less you need. Just like when you're reading a book and you're learning about a subject, at some point you don't need the book to know anymore. You just have it within you. You have the knowledge and wisdom inside. So I think similar in with tools. If you need a rattle or a drum to really understand physically what that feels like, and then eventually you might not need it anymore, and that's okay. You don't necessarily have to have a pendulum to know your yeses and nos and what that feels like internally. It's great to have that visual validation to understand. I think a lot of the tools are used to help understand what you already know inside. And when I do tarot and oracle, it's mostly for the client to connect and to see. We know internally, but to have that external visual connection to it, it just really helps open that channel internally and subconsciously and go, okay, yes, I see and I can connect and I can understand in another layer versus just energetically.
That I really connect with what you just said on the physical piece of it, causing the client to be more open, because I continue to see that, especially with skeptics or people who just are hesitant when they sit down at the table to as you guys know, the way that we connect is a physical divination tool. So for anyone who's listening that doesn't know, my family connects to spirit in one of the ways that we connect to spirit is using a board, which is like, I suppose, questionable in some, not questionable, but like some people don't care for it, but I'm so beyond that at this point that I don't pay much attention to it. But the client is consoled by, looking under the table and putting their finger on the glass themselves, or feeling that I'm not, like, you can see that there's space between me and the glass, technically. It's a comfort for them to see a physical item on the table, and then there's an opening, a soft opening that happens a bit. And I would assume that with tarot and other physical, if you're throwing charms or you're doing a crystal, I mean, I've seen ladies do crystal readings where they're, or, whatever, the physical, because we live in a physical dimension, I think it softens the approach. It makes you seem more approachable and a lot less scary. I think the idea of us not having privacy from someone is scary to people. I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is that, can you imagine walking around in a world where, let's say, 20% of the population knows what you're thinking or doing, or experiences that you've recently had, or that you're pregnant and you don't know you're pregnant, like that, I think frightens people. And I think that's one of the hurdles of getting through this jump that we're making from 3D to 5D, And you see it played out in government and in relationships right now. There's no more hiding. There's no more hiding things. And there's a level of us that we have to get comfortable with. Sorry, I went off on kind of a side tangent, but the point is that we're not scary, and that the tool, although it's there, is not truly how we're getting our information. It is a point of focus, and we are the conduits that cause the information to flow through. And maybe people don't understand that. I talked myself right on into a little.
Perfectly said. I agree.
No, that's good.
Totally agree. But I love the tools, like talk about a little bit, like the musical tools. Not only they have another level of the singing bowls
Yes.
Lena has, or drumming or rattles. Like, it's, yes, physically and visually it has purpose, but it also expels this vibration that we can feel and that we can resonate with our body. Like, I love the moment. I guess one of our biggest tools at home is we have a home little studio and big basses, and so Nick will put on like shamanic drumming for me, and I'll sit in front of the bass and just feel it in the body. And it's just a really cool way of getting into a zone in some way, or connecting with. So for me, a lot of times the tools is just, it's turning my switch on, so that I'm not, like you said, I'm not always, I could be in everybody's privacy and invasive and knowing all the time. But the tool's also great for the practitioner, saying, okay, nope, now we're doing this. This is our on switch.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the zone I'm going to be in. And let's, work mode on and then work mode off when I put the tool back away.
Right.
So one of the things that we brought up while we were prepping for today is the idea of purchasing your own tools. Jen, you probably know more about this than either I do or Missy does, but I think there's this preconceived notion that you can't purchase your own tarot deck.
What?
Especially like a first deck, that you have to be gifted tarot in order to start using it. So I'd like to chat about that a little bit.
I honestly don't know where it originally came from, but that is something that is so ingrained somehow, some way. To me, the feeling is when the teacher's ready or the student's ready, the teacher will show up, type of thing. When I'm ready for tarot, it will show up in my life. And that can be probably like construed as a gift into, and I don't know where along the lines it was like, I have to have some older crone lady, witchy lady, physically give me or pass down something.
I wonder if it comes from, like, there are, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have to be invited into the culture by someone who's already tenured. Is it that sort of philosophy?
It might be somewhere like that too. And I think it's bullcrap. Seriously, like, if I'm ready, I'm gonna, like, I purchased my own tarot deck, but I knew it's one of those, when you know that you're ready to work with this tool or work with this item, it will show up and it will be there, and you'll know to connect with it, or you'll buy it and it'll sit on the shelf until you're ready. I mean, there's no, and the idea that you have like a mass produced item is not as beneficial, like in the area of tarot, for instance. Like, it has to be produced somewhere, some way, and the fact that it's a piece of cardboard or paper doesn't give it any magical qualities. It's what you get out of it. It's the imagery. I could print off of my own computer a deck and work probably just as well, although it wouldn't shuffle as nicely. But it's a matter of what you put into it and how you connect with the imagery is what's important, and what that opens up for you. You got to go purchase your own deck because you want to. Don't let that hold you from something that you really want to do. I've seen people like, well, I can't read tarot yet because I haven't been gifted, but I really wish, I hope someone gifts me this. I hope someone gives me one because I really want to do this. Just go buy it. Go buy it. Go, if you really want something connected nicely, which might lead into our next, is support a local shop, or even better, sometimes you can support a local creator. There's so many out there now on Instagram and Etsy and different things. People who are sitting in their basements or in their little shops small production creating their own decks now.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to see. So you can go by and support one of, them and what they're doing. I think that's just, if you can't buy your own tools and you know what you truly need. See, that's a part of that too, is when I can't take control what I truly need and want. Really bothers me, really gets to me. So if I have to wait for someone to give me something for me to be able to work with it, and that's aside from any cultural and closed practices, by the way. That does not include
Right.
partake. Tarot is not a closed practice, no matter where and what you may see on very different places. Tarot is not a closed practice. So go buy your damn deck.
It takes away so much from the individual if you put that philosophy on everybody. So, for instance, when I first got into singing bowls, I had scheduled a session for my mom as a gift, and I went along with her so that, she didn't have to drive herself if she was super tired afterwards. And I sat in the living room and I could hear the bowls coming from the practitioner's room. And I was like, oh, what is that? That's so beautiful. And I was attracted to the sound, the frequency, right? And so then that's how I started to get into the practice, was because at that time she was preparing to teach her first class to people in the local area. And so she's like, well, I'm going to be offering my first class here. If you're interested, just let me know. Here's some information and I'll get back to you or whatever. And it's the same thing with any other tool. If you're attracted to tarot or drumming or whatever it is, if you feel like you have to be gifted something in order to start working with it, like, you're kind of cutting yourself off at the knees,
Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and here we are again having this discussion about how individual power has been taken from us somehow. And that belief system takes away from the individual and adds to the group. And that's not to say that individual power is more important in a maniacal, malevolent, or, like, we're in a different space now where we don't need to seek the individual power as much. I don't think so. It's time to take it back and make things your own craft.
One of the points that Jen brought up too is to buy from local people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a point that is brought up in a book that I started reading. It's Llewellyn's 2021 Witch's Companion, A Guide to Contemporary Living. So this is a book that has little mini articles by a lot of people who have been in the community for a while. So like Jason Mankey that I brought up last time, he's in here with his partner talking about making your own tools, or just using things that you have in your home to suffice as whatever you need for your practice. But there's another writer in here who talks about buying local, buying secondhand, buying from people who are who are business owners in your area, as opposed to going out and buying cheap statues and candles and cheap Halloween decorations or something from big box discount stores. I'd like to talk about that a little bit too and see how you guys fit with those points.
Always support your local store, because in a sense they're doing the same thing you are. I mean, I will forever be a mom pa shop kind of person. My parents owned their own commercial print shop for years, for my whole life, and so I respect that and respected their struggle. And so for me as an adult, when I became a consumer, my preference was always, in all ways, to, obviously when you can afford it, to go with the smaller stores, because and when I say if you can afford it, it's because they don't have the buying power that big box has. So they can't get you that discount, but they'll sure they'll make up for it in the heart and the soul and the customer service, because I find that the local shops are more apt to give you that heart and soul when they give you something. It comes back to you if you just do it.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I also like the second hand a lot, especially, and that's another kind of, in some areas, controversial when it comes to tarot and oracle decks. Some people will only buy new and think it's tainted.
Haunted.
Yes. Some of the most profound connections I've had with decks are from secondhand or oh man, an antique shop that has this old used tarot deck. Oh god, I would just kill to find one all vintage and stuff. But it's again your intentions. Yeah, you may want to cleanse and clear and connect with the tool the best you can and do what you need to there. But in every case it's going to be different depending on where it's been and what it holds and where you are at in the moment. But buying secondhand is great. Goodwill. I have a friend who gets almost all of her stuff from Goodwill, like all of her little
That's awesome.
witchy different things, and just plus that'll save you some money in a lot of ways. So secondhand can be cleansed if that's a worry that you have. But I also am really finding connecting also if it's not local or you don't have secondhand or you just don't have the stuff there. Definitely check out Etsy and
Etsy,
Instagram.
yeah.
I follow so many small creators who are creating their own decks or their own witch kits or their own even people starting to buy and sell crystals. There's avenues that you may have to wait a little longer for shipping. It's not going to be, Amazon Prime to your door all the time. But if it's truly something that you connect with in that way, you'll wait. It'll be wait when you need, where you need.
I'm loving this shift from big box to small creator because you really can find some of the greatest stuff. All of these genius ideas that never had big monetary backing, but now we have access to it and it might be just exactly what you need and what you're looking for. So I love watching that happen in the collective.
I love antiquing and junking. Going to flea markets and antique stores and Goodwill and Salvation Army is like my favorite thing to do with my mom. We frequent that stuff all the time. And if you're not familiar with the area, we have a place in Amana, Iowa called the Amana Colonies that is very much supporting local crafters and kind of that German heritage. And there's an antique store there that I purchased it's my first big altar. I found it in the store. So the story goes, I saw this piece in the store and I was like, oh my God, that would be the perfect altar. And they had used it for like storing, antique pictures, like picture frames and then pictures that you would pour water out of and different display pieces. And I was like, yeah, no, that needs some witchy stuff on it. And I thought about it and I was like, that's a little more than I wanted to pay, but it was one of those things where it weighed on my mind and I was like, okay, I have to go back and get it. So I went back and I bought it. And the owner of the shop said, well, this came from a train station in Grand Junction. And he said, I don't know exactly what it was used for, but I know that that's where it was from. And I'm like, to me, this looks like something that you would see in a church. So my favorite thing to do is to take like things that may have been used for religious purposes and sort of take back the night and make it all pagan and witchy.
Oh, I love that.
It's a beautiful piece. So to me, connecting with other people and hearing the stories of where these items came from and thinking about how you can create a space in your home for it if you have the space and the means to do it is one of the beautiful things about it. It's not just, going to Michael's and buying the cheap plastic stuff that they come out with every year for Halloween. Not that you can't do that if that's what you really want, but I think there's something to be said for taking it a little deeper.
So what do you say to those people that are like, what if I bring home a box and it's possessed? Like, I see divine intervention in your story. When you can't get an item out of your head, hello, that's spirit or intuition or whatever you want to call it saying, this one right here, this is for you. This is yours. Hello, go back. But what about haunted items or energies that are on an item? Because that has been made so popular in movies and things of that nature. So I would love it if you guys would talk a little bit about getting rid of someone else's energy on it without getting rid of all the good juju as well.
I don't always 100% subscribe. I know that there's some cases where things can get pretty intense. I know that, so I don't want to invalidate anybody who has had experiences. However, I've never, when it comes to either, whether it's a jewelry piece or a deck or a crystal or anything that I've gotten secondhand, it has never been to the point where, like, I have not even hardly, most of the time, I don't even need to cleanse it. Like, I don't, it's already got what I need. I'm attracted to it for a reason. I'm attracted to what it has and what it's going to bring into my life. And if that shifts and changes as I work with it, even better. We have created a relationship, but I don't, if you get a piece and you want to wash a big piece of furniture and you want to wash it down and connect with it, tend to it. That's great. And do that.
That sounds like people. Sorry, I had to insert that. You said it was perfectly worded. I'm attracted to it for a reason, for what they're going to bring into my life. And I'm like, it's no different than a person. You don't need to cleanse them first.
Right. Are you gonna,
if you do, you're in trouble.
You're gonna
Get out.
I was gonna say, if you are attracted, so let's go off of that point then. If everybody who comes to my front door and before I welcome them in, I'm doing a cleansing ceremony, I need to find different people. Right? So
Word.
why I wouldn't have that, what part of me needs to adjust that I'm not attracted to that particular tool or item or whatever. Like, I just don't, I know that I'm going to have it for good, well-intended purposes. I'm searching for a deck, for instance, because I say that just because that's what I'm normally on the hunt for. And I know that I'm going to use it for good things. And I know that I'm going to appreciate and love it. And if it comes into my peripheral or into my space for any reason, or if it's on my mind, I know that I need to have it. And it's not going to come with anything that I need to cleanse.
For me, I know that bringing something into my space, I already hold a frequency, which is going to transmute negativity anyway. Not me personally, but my space does, because I do the back end work. I do the work to keep things clear, and I'm emotionally clear. My family's emotionally clear, and nothing is going to enter the space that's going to be a problem. So keep that in mind too. It doesn't have to be all smoke and sage, and that's my opinion.
Sometimes I will find that there's a deck, if I'm working with something and it's clunky and it's just not, it's for you, but it's just not flowing, whether it's a rattle that's not sounding right, or a bowl that just sounds a little like screechy, or I don't know, something, then you may want to cleanse it and kind of get that flow back, like kind of like you stretching your arms and stuff, kind of groaning and getting out of bed, like you want to tend to it. But I don't think I've ever come across where I need to like get rid of bad juju before I bring an item into my home.
I haven't had that experience either. And I know that there are people who like actively search for haunted objects and they like to collect them. I'm thinking about Zach Baggins, the host of Ghost Adventures. He has a museum in which he has haunted objects and different things that people can come look at. I haven't had that experience with anything that I have come across or purchased. And it wasn't until like maybe a couple of years ago that I realized some people have sort of a prejudice against antiques because of that. They don't want to purchase something that's old because they're afraid, oh, well, it might have an energy or it might come with a spirit attached to it. And I'm like both of you guys in the sense that if it's not meant to be with me, then I'm not going to be interested in it. And I'm probably not going to come across it. So I haven't had a bad experience with anything that I've purchased. And it's something that I maintain with my spiritual team out there. I'm like, yo, if there's something out there that doesn't belong in my space, then just don't even let me come across it or something like that. And that's not necessarily out of fear. It's just, put in front of me what should be with me type of a mentality.
If someone has had that experience, I would love to break that down with you guys, to listen to their story and to break it down and maybe do some brainstorming on why and what. And it's not that it wasn't a thing, because I do believe that there can be cursed objects. I'm not saying it's not possible, but and
I think some of it's a perceived, like, just so maybe can I welcome in another entity, so for instance, after my grandma passed, I created a little pendulum. It was a little cremation urn hanging around my necklace, and I created this tool. I created this sacred item for her, and I have welcomed in her essence more. So I think that's a lot of that, maybe more so than so I'm bringing in someone's essence if they pre-owned it or something like that. And because if you're not well in tune with who you are or have your space so confidently held with sacredness or good vibrations, it may feel jarring, which may then feel like, oh, this is cursed. And not everything that is energy is cursed or haunted. It just may be
Right.
simply
It's just not in resonance.
right.
Good point.
Yeah.
But some of that too, what Lena was saying about my team and helping me have only in front of me what I need. Have you had where you had then going back to like the too many idea of tools and stuff where things have then all of a sudden like felt not necessarily icky or bad, but like, okay, I got to get rid of this. This has just, have you ever just like, I got to clear space. I got to get this out of my house. I'm done with it. I got to pare down.
I feel that way about all my shit.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I think part of what a lot of us are doing right now when we've been stuck at home for so long is taking a look at the clutter, the things that we just don't use. So for me, it's not necessarily that I have lost alignment with an object or a tool. It's just that I take a look at it and it's like, I have not touched that either since the day I bought it or in the last 6 months. It can probably serve somebody else better. So how can I either regift it or swap it or sell it or something like that so that it can better serve other people? And so that was something that I wanted to chat about, was the local deck swap that we had here and that you hosted, Jen, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, that came from this whole premise is that I had too much stuff. I had too many decks. I think I got up to probably, not exaggerating, damn near 70 decks personally. Like I had collected a lot of decks between tarot and oracle. And I just have like, about the art and some of the things that people create is just so amazing to me. And I needed it. Maybe I got something and I used it for a week. It was profound. And then all of a sudden it didn't resonate anymore. So it's like, I'm not afraid of purchasing or acquiring a tool for what I need in the moment. And then if it has to go somewhere else again, it will. So I ended up seeing the need to downsize and knowing that there were also a lot of people out there who just couldn't quite invest in a $50 deck, because some of these decks, especially if you get the more smallly produced ones or whatever, high quality card stock or the boxes, they can get kind of pricey sometimes. So offering an option for people, I saw people wanting to get into it, again, either hesitant to buy their own or to invest in, or even to see all of the options and physically touch them. Can you go like and pull the deck out and shuffle it and see if it resonates? Look through all of the art, because everything in a box store, right, is all covered in plastic. You can't open it. You just kind of got to browse online. Anyway, so I coordinated with a local shop here to do a deck swap. And everybody could bring in your decks. You brought in a deck, you got a ticket, and or you could purchase a ticket if you didn't have a deck for like $5. So you could have ended up getting a brand new deck or slightly used deck for $5. And we just went through and we put them all on the table, drew tickets, and we just started picking one by one until all the decks were either gone, and ended up donating the money to suicide prevention in the local area as well. So
nice.
That wasn't, nothing was, it was a good way to get rid of things, to acquire new tools, and then to also donate. So no one was really making a profit off of any of it, but that was I would love to start doing, once we can kind of gather again more, is to do more of bigger swaps, not just like a swap meet, like a metaphysical swap meet, where it's more tools. So we limited it just to the decks. Unfortunately, I have so many other things I could have regifted or whatever, but I think at some point that might be something that we could help facilitate in doing more of things like that. So you can try it out, see if it resonates. Try it, and again, people seeing that their deck gets taken away, but they find a different deck that they resonated fully with. So it was a really cool process.
So what is, of all of these things, what is the problem with having too many tools? Why is that an issue? Why do you feel like you needed to pare down? What's wrong with 70 decks of tarot or whatever the case may be?
I think for me, it was feeding into some part of me, like overconsumption. I was filling the void. It wasn't trusting the things I felt like, okay, oh, that animal deck's going to be perfect because it connects me with blah, 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 blah. And instead of just trusting whatever, I was putting too much emphasis on the tool itself versus it helping me with my own intuition or my own gifting. There's a lot of times you buy something and you think you're going to love it, and then you're like, God, this is just sucky. Especially in some I've had that in some decks. So I'm not saying it's the deck's fault. It's just it didn't resonate. And so why keep that around and hoarding things? It kind of becomes, I'm more of an addictive person anyway. So once I latch onto something, I want to keep. Leda's pointing at herself too. Yeah. Like I want to keep doing more and more and more. And so I realized it was becoming a little compulsive and needed to nip that in the bud a little bit. I'm the same with books. I can't get rid of my books. I have a hard time with that.
Oh, girl, don't do that.
Man.
I'm the same way. For me, it was about, again, not trusting my own intuition and not listening to what was really resonating versus what I thought was cool.
Yeah.
The thing about Oracle and Tarot decks is that they're gateway drugs in the sense that you love the artwork and it's so pretty, and well, this deck is themed around this and this deck is themed around that. And it's not that we're not saying, okay, you can only have one deck. That's not what we're saying at all. It's that you can have different tools for different things, and having a kit that you can pull from based on what is necessary is very valid. It's that mindless consumption, that overconsumption of just getting something because you think it's neat. And that's what really drew me to start doing the collective readings that I do, was that I wanted to put my own energy into creating something, even if it was just a collection of objects that I could pull from and that had specific meaning to me. So like in my divination kit that I have, there are objects in there that I know exactly what it means, but if somebody saw it on the table, they'd be like, what the French toast is that? So to me, it was really about finding that strength within myself. And the minute that you decide that you flip that switch between I need something external versus I need to do this to prove to myself, that's where the good stuff happens. And again, that's not to knock on anybody that goes to a metaphysical store and picks a deck off the shelf, because Lord knows we all do that. And that's still very awesome and fabulous. Using your own discernment and your own powers of intuition is what's key here.
There's so many, pop culture type stuff out there, with all the Instagram and the TikToks, and they're showing these popular decks and popular tools and different things. And if that doesn't resonate for you, and if you don't like it, then that doesn't make you any less of a reader or a witch or a diviner or a, whatever thing it is. Just because you don't like the traditional Rider-Waite deck doesn't mean you're any less of a tarot reader. Okay. I have yet to purchase a Rider-Waite tarot deck, the traditional old school deck. I don't resonate with it. And so, or if you do, don't let that deter you from the tool. If it's just because it's a popular item, you don't have to. I'm one where I tend to, especially with books or different things, if it's a really hot item and collectively it's very popular, I'll kind of hold a prejudice against it, and I won't use it. I won't pick it up. I won't try it out. And I end up shooting myself in the foot a lot of times, because sometimes it's a good nugget. Follow what you are connected to, no matter whether it's popular or not, is the point.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think I would be remiss in my position to say, unless you are very a tenured individual, do not purchase spirit boards secondhand, as those are more of a portal versus cards are not a portal. Worker creates the portal, the cards themselves do not become the portal. So I think that I just felt like I needed to say that for people. That's all.
For sure.
Don't be doing that shit, people.
I was gifted a spirit board. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
That is the one gift I had.
It is absolutely. I love the old boards. The problem is because I think they're cool. They're neat to look at, and I have a reverence for connecting with boards, and I'm not scared of it. It's the price.
Right.
Pay $500 for a board that was made in 1902. Maybe when I'm a rich bitch someday, I will have a whole room full of $500 spirit boards. But right now, my glass cup and my tiny pieces of handwritten paper are working just fine.
Right.
love
That,
it.
I know we're kind of getting long-winded here on this one, but that's a good point though too, of making your own, and it doesn't have to cost a fortune. I know we kind of touched on that, but things like making your own runes, there's something to be said with that versus buying a plastic set or a mass-produced set from a box
Parker
store.
Brothers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's something to be said of making and seeking out the items and creating it that way. I'm not as well versed in runes. I would love to one day, but I think we kind of covered that a little bit, but not too in depth yet.
Runes are kind of like tarot in the sense that there's this perception that you have to be gifted a set in order to start working with them. And I would say out of all of the things that I have in my toolkit, runes are the things that I'm the most that I'm the most picky about. Because if you get into studying, for example, either the Elder or the Younger Futhark, the modern interpretations that we have of them now are essentially our best guesses because there is no written text exactly outlining what they mean. And yes, we know that they correspond to letters of our modern English alphabet, but they're so shrouded in mystery still to this day that ordering something off of Amazon that's made out of plastic is not necessarily what I want to do. And if you study the mythology of how they came about, the story goes that in order to discover the runes, Odin hung himself from the world tree for 9 days or 9 nights. And at the end of that, after he sacrificed himself to himself, because there was nobody else, because he was the top dog, right? The top god, that's when the runes were revealed to him. And so to me, there's almost this tradition of making a small sacrifice. And for us, I think that translates into sacrificing our time, spending time with them, making effort, doing research, reading, practicing, pulling a rune and spending time with it for a while versus just Amazon priming a set to your door in 2 days. So in that sense, I think it's really about upholding that tradition and being mindful of not mindlessly consuming those. So anyway, I'm just going to keep talking about runes if I don't stop myself. So whatever thoughts you guys have on that, feel free to chime in.
I went, I am going to poke the bear here. You brought up, isn't that where, by the way, side note, isn't that Odin concept where the hanged man comes from in tarot?
One of it, it's across many cultures, but yes, that is
Interesting.
one of. Jesus is also part of that too.
I was just going to say, it reminds me, again, I'm going to go big because that's where my brain is at, of the sacrifice. Is it sacrifice or is it suffering? And we can have an addiction to that mentality. We can have an addiction to suffering. We can have an addiction to sacrificing. And so I think that sacrificing my time to create something is not quite where I would put that. To me, emotion is a catalyst for this entire dimension. And when I'm creating something, I'm putting my heart and soul into it. I can only compare it right now to when I create sigils for healing sessions. That is back end work that no one really sees, but it is a way to, what we were talking about before, focus your energy into something. And so I don't know. I don't feel like we are meant to, or that we have to sacrifice or suffer in any way to achieve some sort of end goal.
Well, and maybe sacrifice isn't the right word, because that's not what I mean either. I don't mean to say
Okay.
you have to suffer in order to do this. Maybe it's more of making that conscious commitment of saying, and using your intention of saying, okay, this is what I want to use this for. This is why I identify with this, and willingly step into it.
The emotional connection to the work that you're doing
Yeah.
would be, okay, that makes sense.
You're
Yeah.
doing the work. Yeah, like you said, you're putting in.
So from Odin's perspective, he saw that, do you think, as doing the work?
What do you
That's
mean
what
by
it
that?
took for Odin to get emotionally connected, kind of thing? I don't know.
I assume so. I don't know.
I mean, it's just like when you go through a meditative practice or you go through anything, it's not or waiting to buy from, a local shop off of Etsy, and it might take a couple weeks for it to get to you versus that instant gratification from Amazon Prime. There is this wait period. It is a little bit of suffering to say, yeah, I could be instant gratification on one hand and just keep riding through and not really having what are the emotions that go through and having to wait or having to put effort into learning the rune one at a time and working with its vibration and its energy, or connecting with this crystal and seeing anybody can be a tarot reader or a crystal worker or whatever and learn it by the book. Anybody can be successful in doing these things, but it's when you really put in the effort and the work with your tool or without your tool is when the magic truly just like implodes and is mind-blowing in a lot of ways. So I think that and then in the text that we read, and this could be a whole nother different topic and tangent, is their language that they're using just simply doesn't align with the language we're using now, and it has shifted. So that to them could have been what they meant with suffering. Like I'm willing to put myself through some sort of work in some way to gain an outcome versus that instant gratification, instant consumerism, I'm just going to look this up. It's just like when an animal comes across your path and you're like, oh, what's that mean? I'm going to look it up. And then I instantly know, versus working with it, seeing where your true intuition is leading you. And that could be he had to suffer to be able to shut off his mind or get into that state to hear what these messages were. I have to suffer through not knowing what that, crow means, because
Hashtag first world problems, right?
But
Odin's hanging himself for 9 days, and here we are Googling.
Right.
Right.
So there's this, it sucks not knowing, and there's that internal agony, and there's that bubbling of your intuition, and finally you'll get that aha moment, and then you can validate on the back end. I think that's kind of some of that point here, is doing the work. Can it be uncomfortable and suffering at some point, but
if you operate on the assumption that everything on the planet and in this dimension, or in all dimensions actually, are an energetic exchange, it's equal for equal, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and there's also part of the discussion is also the notion that G can life, right? It's not necessarily to say that we need to go hang ourselves on a tree for 9 days in order to achieve something. It's taking that lesson and applying it to yourself, right? So you don't have to be that extreme, and these myths have grown over the centuries, and they're wonderful and fabulous and sometimes bizarre to read, but it's so much like, okay, how can I trickle that down and apply it to myself so that I understand?
Oh, you're supposed to be flexible with the stories and apply them to current day? What?
Wow, I know.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that means too with your tools and kind of circle. I mean, just because this stone means one thing to one person and vibrates for them and creates that connection on one level, rose quartz means self-love, but to someone else, I have a friend who rose quartz is like her master like cleanser.
Interesting.
Instead of a clear quartz. So it's all about how you connect with your tool and what it's doing for you. So being flexible and not just because someone else said this one thing, or this tarot card reads this way, or this rune, you know, if it doesn't read for you in the same way, then that's fine. It's all how you connect with your tool, and having less tools allows for you to really hear those messages, I think, also.
Yep.
Not being we were so consumed with all this stuff. It gets faster and faster. We went from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok, right? It gets quicker and faster in your face.
Yes.
And so you want all these things and all this, you know, 30, 40, 60 decks, and it's just fast, and I can just consume it all. But when you have less, it allows you to slow down and listen.
Right. Bottom line, do your inner work, friends. I mean, that's something everyone can agree on, I think. We need to do the inner work. So, all right, guys, we got a little long on this one, but I think we're good. So we want to thank everybody for joining us today. And again, if you want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can find us on Facebook under Quantum Coalescence, and on Instagram at Quantum Coalescence, and our email address is quantumcoalescence@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you and hear your experiences with tools. If you can top Jen's 70 decks, we want to know. We want to know. We are also looking for people who want to be potentially someday a guest on our show. That's something we're going to get to here. We have lots of big plans, the three of us, on how we're going to help our community and our collective. So keep listening and keep supporting. I'm shamelessly saying, please put a review on our podcast, because that's the only way they survive, friends. Thank you.